The purpose of secularism is to fight for an equal society for all, regardless of their beliefs or lack of them. And nothing could be more fundamental to that equality than one law for all. And that law should be democratically determined, and it should respect human rights. We appear to be heading to self-appointed religious authorities awarding themselves court-like powers. In some cases, they're using the Arbitration Act and other legal devices to enforce their decisions with the full weight of English law. According to the Sunday Times on the 14th of September this year, and an article headlined UK's first official Sharia courts, Islamic law, and I'm quoting here, has been officially adopted in Britain, with Sharia courts given powers to rule on Muslim civil cases. The government has quietly sanctioned the powers for Sharia judges to rule on cases ranging from divorce and financial disputes to those involving domestic violence. Rulings issued by a network of 5 Sharia courts are enforceable with the full power of the judicial system through the county courts or the High Court, it said. I'd rather hope that this was an exaggeration, but then I looked at the website of the Muslim Arbitration Tribunal, which I shall call MAT for short, that continues in a somewhat similar vein. And I quote again from that, this time from that website. Although MAT must operate within the legal framework of England and Wales, it says, this does not prevent or impede MAT from ensuring that all determinations reached by it are in accordance with one of the recognised schools of Islamic sacred law. Those are in capitals. MAT will therefore, for the first time, offer the Muslim community a real and true opportunity to settle disputes in accordance with Islamic sacred law, with the knowledge that the outcome as determined by MAT will be binding and enforceable. End of quote. I've been looking over the last year or so at the procession of eminent figures that have been making public pronouncements or taking part in prestigious debates and seminars about the inevitability or desirability of expanding the power and reach of Sharia law in the UK. And the constant stream of events and pronouncements would do credit to the best oiled public relations campaign. What I found the most worrying in these events is a serious downplaying of the problems or dangers of Sharia, as if they're mentioned at all. The most prestigious of the rolling programme of events has been in the Inns of Court as part of a series entitled Islam in English Law. One of these contained the Archbishop of Canterbury's now infamous speech. To be fair, he did acknowledge that that there were some problems, but nevertheless he's been seduced by the advantage that giving greater clout to any religious law will give him in his own self-serving campaigns. I refer to his determination to elevate religious conscience above the law in all but the most extreme cases, and to elevate the rights for religious groups over the rights for individuals. Now, particularly in the area of family law, the stakes are very high. As well as dissolution or continuation of marriages and custody of children, these tribunals also see the allocation of millions of pounds of assets, for example, in divorce or intestacy. Yet it's far from clear over whom these arbitration councils have so-called jurisdiction. According to the Christian Research statistics, active Muslim members are taken as half of the community. So to what extent do the councils hold sway over these who are not active, or indeed those who are forced by their families to be active? Why should those who are not actively and of their own free will opted of an Sharia arbitration be bound by the decisions of these men? And of course it is always men. Until a few months ago, I seemed to be about the only person worrying about alternative dispute resolution creeping into criminal law. Yet the Sunday Times article reported that the chairman of the governing council of the tribunal, Sheikh Siddiqui, expected the courts to handle, and I'm quoting here, a greater number of smaller criminal cases in coming years as more Muslim clients approach them. According to him, all we're doing is regulating community affairs in these cases. Well, will these tribunals punish those committing legal acts, for example, homosexual acts? And how severe, if so, will they be permitted to make that punishment? At the other end of the spectrum, how will those found guilty of genuine criminal acts be treated for criminal record purposes? Or will the absence of a record be a perk reserved for those submitting to this quasi-justice? It gets worse. Sheikh Hassan, who's the General Secretary of a London-based organisation called the Islamic Sharia Council, told a television team, "Sharia's knocking on the door of Britain. If Sharia is implemented, we can turn this country into a haven of peace, because if a thief's hand is cut off, nobody steals. If once, just once, an adulterer is stoned, no one would commit this crime," he said. British society, he added, should acknowledge this system. If they don't accept it, they'll need more prisons. If they do, possibly more gibbets. To me, both the government and the judicial authorities appear to be sitting on their hands and letting the justice system slowly disintegrate. But some at least have got the message, and we need to start the fight back. I'm indebted to Khalid Mahmood, Labour MP for Birmingham Perry Bar, and a practicing Muslim, for saying, with admirable directness, what Lord Phillips and the Archbishop are discussing is something that is completely outside their area of understanding. Allowing Sharia in parts of the UK will be divisive. This will create a two-tier society. It is highly retrograde. It will segregate and alienate the Muslim community from the rest of British society. The majority of British Muslims want to live only under British law, and they would reject anything that means they are treated differently. And I was even more relieved that in this building, in October, the Law Lords concluded in a family law and asylum case that, and I quote, Sharia law is incompatible with human rights legislation. They were referring to the imposition of Sharia abroad, but I do not see any safeguards to give us any confidence that Sharia applied here would be any better. Liberty said the ruling upheld basic protections which must be available to all. But are they? Alternative dispute resolution has a legitimate role, but the growth industry in ADR is not in these kinds of commercial cases, and the self-appointed, unregulated tribunals are gaining in strength. They increasingly hold themselves up as the courts, courts with as much force as the law of the land, but are not operating with the same controls and safeguards. So in conclusion, I'd like to say that the National Secular Society will be working together with One Law for All and the Lawyers Secular Society to gather as much more information about how the vulnerable suffer under the Sharia law in the UK. And this is not entirely virgin territory. There is a possible template for success. In the Canadian province of Ontario, they were similarly concerned with these issues, where there's a similar arbitration situation there. And after a comprehensive study, they ended all religious arbitration in 2005. So our next task is to come up with proposals, possibly including legislative ones, as to how the vulnerable can be better protected and how existing equality and human rights for all in the UK can be permanently protected from the never-ending clamour for yet more religious privileges. And we're certainly considering, as part of our legislative proposals that may well come out of this, that of actually saying that it is, and it was touched on earlier, an offence to actually hold out to be a court when you're not. And it's these kind of issues which we may need to refine and get to. And I think it's extremely important. But also you saw from some of the quotes that I read out, rather chilling ones I felt, from this Muslim Arbitration Council and from the guy who wanted to extend Muslim law, that it really is, it's part of an ongoing expansion of this area, and I wonder where it's leading if we don't actually start to clip its wings a bit.